welcome. This is Preeti. I am so glad you're joining me today. Today I'm using this beautiful stamp called Wedding Bouquet. It has some pretty roses and some wonderful sentiments in it. And I'm also going to use some watercolor cardstock. This is a hot press watercolor cardstock. And I'm going to use some Distress Oxide ink and Distress inks. Actually, I'm going to show you, I'm going to combine these two ink mediums to do a watercolor project. And I'm also using this Oxide, not the Oxide, sorry, Obsidian black ink from Altenew for the crisp blackness of the color of the ink, one. And also because it's pigment ink, it stays wet for longer time. That means to say I can use my embossing powder to emboss that area to create that raised effect. And I'm using some clear embossing powder here, and I'm going to do this multiple times. So I'm just going to put two more clusters of roses, an individual rose and a rose bud on the third corner of this third side of this cardstock. And then I'm going to start coloring that using the Distress Oxide ink. As I said earlier, I want to show you how I plan to use the Distress Oxide as well as the Distress ink on for this watercolor project. So I'm just going to put the both the inks down on my glass mat here, and I'm using picked raspberry for the Distress ink and Kitsch Flamingo for the Distress Oxide ink. And I start off with the Distress ink, and then I quickly realize, and you'll see that in a minute here, and then I try to blend that with the Distress Oxide ink, and then I realized that maybe that's not the right way to approach it. Rather, I should actually start off with the Distress Oxide ink and then add the Distress ink over it. And you can see here I've started to do that. And what that did is, because the Distress Oxide ink has the chalky finish, it actually is quite lighter. It's not as intense as as the Distress ink is. So it was easier to add the lighter ink first and then add the deeper shade of that pink, which is the Distress ink, over it. And it actually even helped the ink move better. I also realized that when I added the Distress ink first and then added the Distress Oxide, it was not really blending the way I wanted it to blend, even though the surface was wet. So if you're trying to combine these two colors and if it's not blending, then try doing the opposite way. Try doing this Distress Oxide first and then adding the Distress ink over it. Now, you also want to keep in mind the watercolor cardstock that I'm using is not cold press, where cold press cardstocks are quite grainy, the surface is grainy, whereas a hot press, the surface is going to be very, very smooth. So I don't know if that played any role in the colors not blending as easily as I wanted it to be in the first way, where but either way, I think adding the Distress Oxide ink first and then adding the Distress ink actually even helped it to be quite vibrant versus other way, because the moment you add Distress Oxide over the Distress ink, it does make the Distress ink also look very chalky, and I didn't want the finish to be chalky, and that's absolutely fine if you want to do it if you want to have the chalky finish, but I didn't want that. I wanted to be vibrant and bold, and that's the reason why I chose to go that direction. Here I chose two different green shades. I chose Mowed Lawn and Peeled Paint. Peeled Paint was my Distress ink and Mowed Lawn was my Distress Oxide ink. And again, I'm doing the same thing here, adding the Distress Oxide and then adding the Distress Paint over that. And I actually went back over that with the Distress ink once again, just to brighten it up a little bit. The Peel Paint is a muted green. It's not a vibrant green. And so I kind of wanted it to be a little more vibrant, so I did just go over just that darker shade with Mowed Lawn just to brighten it a bit more, and you can see there how that looks. And I really liked how this flower, this bunch turned out, and I did the same thing for all my flowers and leaves. And you can see I'm making 2 cards simultaneously. One has 3 clusters of roses, and this one has just a single flower bunch, a rose cluster at the corner. And then I'm taking this sentiment here. This one reads, "Love you forever." And I'm going to stamp that in the center of this background that I created using the same Distress Oxide, no, sorry, the Obsidian Black Altenew ink. Again, I'm going to emboss this using clear embossing powder just to keep up with that same outline as in the flower. I just wanted to make sure that everything looked very similar as far as the black ink was. And I used the word congratulations for the second card, and I added that on the top part of the of this card. So I just kept this card quite simple. Both these cards are cards that you can give to your loved ones. One is like a wedding card, and the other one is just love you forever. And I'm going to add an additional sentiment here quickly, and you'll see the entire sentiment, how it pairs up. And I'm also going to use this stitched rectangle. It's not really a die. It actually embosses, or rather adds stitched lines, double stitched lines on the borders of the cardstock. And this is by Lawn Fawn, and it's quite an old one, and I've been having it for a long time, and that's what I added, just to add a little bit of detail to the edge of the cardstock. I don't know if you can see that. It looks really, really beautiful. And then I'm going to take this additional sentiment. This is from Little Things, and the sentiment reads, it reads, "Because of you, I laugh a little harder, cry a little less, and smile a lot more." And then I just pair that with "Love you forever." And you can definitely look at your stamp sets that you have in your stash and pair different sentiments and different styles of fonts. Like here, I'm taking a script font, and I'm styling it with some typewritten form or modern forms, and you can see how they interchange and how they look beautiful with each other, combined with each other. And I did the same thing for the congratulation card as well. For that, I took the sentiment from the Magnificent Bloom stamp set, and that reads, "Congratulations, have a magnificent day." And then all that was left to do was to add a few gemstones, and this gemstones is from Crafty Meraki's Magical Sparkle, and I just did a scattering of odd numbers all over the card panel. And then all that was left to do was to adhere these panels onto a top folding white note card, and I kept the size of the panel, the colored panel, the same as the note card, so there was no white showing from underneath it, because this creamy cardstock, the watercolor cardstock is creamy, and I wanted that to be the whole card panel. And here you can see how these 2 cards turned out. And here are the closer look of the cards, and I really hope you give these Distress Oxide inks a go for your next watercoloring project. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.